Welcome to another Frontend Engineering Explained. So as the title mentioned, in this one, we're going to be having a look at form layouts and how CSS grid and a little bit of Subgrid can make laying out forms much easier. We're going to be looking at two examples. So the first is this one, which we have basically 3 fields and then 2 fields. And at the top, we have a very wide one, like a mid-size, and then a smallish one. And then the difference with the other one is we have this one field that takes up only half, but then we want the next two to break onto the next row. Now, formula historically has been could be pretty tricky. And then especially if you also have to think about being responsive, then it can add its own level of complexity. With CSS Grid and also using Subgrid, we can achieve all of these things, including responsiveness, I would say very easily. So let's start by thinking of our layout over here, the entire thing, as a grid, of course, but more specifically, let's divide it into 12 columns. Now, I'm not going to do it right here on screen, so we can kind of just imagine it. So if we think that from the one edge to the other edge, we have 12 columns that's evenly split, then we could say, ignoring the gaps, that these ones take up half, so 6. These two are split between the remainder, but obviously not equally. So we could say 6 to 4. And at the bottom, we can say 6 and 6. Not too concerned about necessarily how many columns this one will span, but it's at the end. And then our heading or legend just spans the full width. Not super critical that we really set this, but we will set it and I'll show you in a moment. Same deal here. This one takes up 6, 6 and 6, 6 and 6. This one again is a full width one, and this one again is a full width one. And then we'll look at the mobile in a second. So let's jump in and write the HTML. Now, to be clear, before I jump into the HTML, we're not going to actually put the form fields in this video. We're going to look at basically containers representing the form fields. The reason is I don't want to cram too much into one thing. So I'm going to be recording another video where I'm going to look at form validation with Zod. I've hinted at that one in a previous video when I talked about Zod for data validation. And in that video, we'll then replace these placeholder containers with these form fields and then add validation on top of that. So today we're just going to talk about how we get our structure and our layout. With that out of the way, let's dive in. So we're going to first just have a form. We're just going to give it a name. Don't really need to give it all these things, but hey, why not? Method, we make it post, and that's our form. And then as mentioned, we're going to use a field set so we can group our related form elements together, like our address information, but it nicely doubles up as our container. So another benefit here. And then we're going to use our legend, and this is going to say address information. And then, as mentioned, if we look back here, we have 3 fields, then we have 2 fields, and then we have our button container. So we're going to wrap each of these in a div. So we'll say form field, and of course a div because there isn't another more semantic element that makes sense here. This is just a general box that we're using, so a div is perfect for this. And then 2, and then we have 1 more. So basically that is our structure for the one part of our form, our address information. So now we have our HTML, so let's dive into our CSS. And I'm going to write it right here just because it makes it nice and easy to have both in the same screen, so to speak, in the same view. And I'm just going to add some box sizing here, and then we're going to dive in. So starting with our container, of course, we want to set it to display grid. Then we want to set our grid template columns, and we want to split this available space into 12 equal parts. Now, thankfully, we don't have to write 1FR, which would be 1 fraction of our available space 12 times. We can use the repeat function, say 12, 1FR. And then let's give it a little bit of gap, which I hinted at. So this is taking care of our container now. Now we can't see anything yet in the browser, but that's going to change very soon. So form fields. So these are our individual columns, so to speak. And we're going to give this some additional styling just so we can see it for today, while we're not going to stick actual form elements in here just yet. So what we will do is we'll give it a background color of hot pink, why not? And then we will do a block size, which equates to height if you're thinking physical properties, but we're using logical properties. I'll link that video down in the description where I talked about logical properties. So we're going to give this 2rem. So this is the height of our div. Then the important one, grid column. And now what we're going to do is we're going to use the keyword span. And that says, now we're going to tell this column how many columns to span. But this is variable, right? And so we're going to use a custom property called colspan. Not defined yet. We're going to define that soon. You will see. And then lastly, we just set an inline size here just to make sure that it stretches for its full width or full inline size. And that is it. Again, right now, if we jump into the browser, let's do that. We're seeing this, right? Because now what's happening is our address information sits over here. Like I said, we don't really need to, but I'm going to show you, I'm going to give it a, grid column value just to demonstrate something. And then here you can see basically, because we haven't given this any call span yet, it's defaulting to 1. And so if you think about it, we have 6 boxes here. We have a total of 12. So you can see it's divided our available space into 12 equal bits. And we're currently filling up 6 of them. But of course, this is not the layout we want. We'll get to that in a second. So let's have a look at the legend. So the legend, we could do the following. You could do span 12. That'll work. Problem is, if you change this tomorrow to 16, you'll have to find all instances where you did this and update it to be 16. Otherwise, now it's not taking up the full space anymore. An alternative you can do to avoid that problem is to use this syntax. And basically what this is saying, it says start at column 1 and span all the way until the last column, whatever that may be, 6, 12, 18, 24, it doesn't matter. So if we look at this over here, let's imagine this is a grid with a row of 6 columns. This would be column 1, this would be column 6, or -1. So that's essentially what you're saying. You're saying start at column 1 and span up to -1. So therefore you don't hard code, so to speak, the number 6, which gets you into hot water, as explained, but instead you're just saying span up to the end. So that's kind of nice. I wish we kind of had a span all. That would be nice, where it's just span everything as like a value keyword. I will explain to you why I think that in another way very, very soon. Because there's one tricky thing here that will bite us on mobile. And I'll tell you about it now, but I'll also demonstrate it. So how are we going to set how many columns each of these fields span is by using an inline style attribute. And then in there, we're going to set our col span custom property to the value we want it to be. So we almost have a declarative kind of way of indicating in our HTML how many columns we want this field to span. So let me show you what I mean by that. So style equals col span 6. So now if we go back to the browser, we can see that this first one is now actually spanning 6 because our value is being set to that. So if we follow the same logic, then this one needs to be 2 and this one needs to be 4, right? And that's exactly what we want. And now if we take 6 to 4, we have 12. So our next ones are dropping to the next level. So if we continue and so now we can basically just kind of copy this one over here and we can head into this, add multiple cursors and bada bing, there we are. Now this last one is where I said, I wish I could do this. That would be super nice. Because now I could do this, right? And it would work. Looks great. But We're now implicitly or explicitly, actually, we are telling it span 12 columns. But when we do our mobile version of this or our smaller screen version of this, we're actually going to limit our number of columns to 6. But because of this, we're going to kind of override that and try and push it to 12, and then things will break. We'll get to that in a second. So I'm going to leave this at 12 here, but I'm telling you that this is going to be a problem. So if we look at it now, this is what we want. If we go back to our design, right? This is exactly what we want. We want a 6, 2, 4, 6, 6, and then a full. So 6, 2, 4, 6, 6, and full. And of course, it responds as we would expect. But you can see, I mean, at some point, it's these two, the 2 and 4 is getting really tiny, right? So what we probably want is something like this. So the top one just takes the full width, the other two fall down, and then the last two also fall in their own row, and the last one just stays in its own row. So how do we achieve this? We can achieve this with very few lines. So we're going to do at media screen, and then we're going to say width less than 48 rem. So 48 rem is 1024. So that's generally your tablet at portrait size. So you're saying anything smaller than that, we need to put and in here. We're going to grab this one, and all we need to change, we don't have to do anything there, so we're just going to change this to 6. I'll show you an even nicer way you could do this. Well, nicer for me anyway. You might also like that. So now basically what it says is once we are smaller than 1024 pixels, then change the number of columns from 12 to 6. And then if you think about our design, 6, 2, 4, 6, 6. So of course this will just work, right? But now if we resize, we can already see those ones at the top. You know, oh, something is very wrong. This is also the wrong way round. Whoa, that's not what I want. With less than 48 rem. So now we'll see, okay, we're back to normal. Now when we resize, oh, that's the opposite of what we wanted. We wanted to give these more space, not less. And this is where that 12 is causing problems for us that I was referring to down here. And why I said I wish we had it all, would be nice. But we can work with this. So what we're going to do instead is, instead of having this, we'll have another one, and we'll say, just let's call it full width. Let's split it because that's probably a better naming. So this one, and then what we want to do with this is, instead of saying grid column span blah blah blah, we'll do the trick from earlier. I just use the syntax to tell it when it's form field full width, then just span the entire column. So for fields like this, we'll just set it to, do I still have that here? Let's see. Yes, and then we drop off our style, right? So now if we go back to our browser and we resize, boop, now you can see there it drops down just as we would expect. Of course, at some point it's ridiculously small, but for now, but up to where we are targeting, we are safe. Because this is just your postal code input, you still have more than enough room. You can even go a little bit smaller. Even there, it's still pretty good. And we'll see that when we actually put our form fields in there. So that takes care of that one. It also explains why I'd like for there to be a span all. Couldn't find it. Maybe it does exist already, but I couldn't find that when I looked at the documentation on MDN. But this is a simple enough workaround, right? So this one, what could you do instead? Well, what you could do is you could make this, you could either make this entire thing or just this value be a custom property. Let's say we're making it the entire thing our custom property. Then we could do something like this. We can say, so let's do, or let's just call it calls. Why not? I think that's okay to use. And Actually, we're not going to do it like that. Let's do it like this. I'm going to cut this and I'm going to use var cols here. Now nothing is defined yet. Let's make it TNPL cols, template columns, right? Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to say add media screen and width greater than 48 rem. So this is now the opposite of above. You're going to say container dash dash template calls is that. And then we're going to duplicate this and we're going to say 6 and we're going to remove that. So now if we go back to our browser, we have that there, and but when we move down there, it's like this. So basically now we're just driving the value here from a custom property. We're not giving it an initial value, but instead, so instead of overriding, we're setting the appropriate value for our media breakpoint. So we know that when we're at less than 48, we want it to be repeat 6. When we are at greater than 48, we want it to be at repeat 12. With that, we have a really nice responsive form layout. But there's one more thing, of course, and that is the one here at the top, which introduces this little guy. So let's add that one. So we're going to duplicate the field set. And then let's jump in here and make this personal information like this. I'm going to drop this one down. And then we have basically two full width, another full width. So this is our checkbox field. This is our button. And then these are first name, last name, email, website, I think. So we want all of these to be 66, number of the beast, 66 like this, right? 66666, blah, blah, blah. So now if we go to our browser where this is running, that is not what we want. And it's because we're running into this problem where Grid is saying, well, I don't know what your problem is. I don't have a problem because 6 and 6 makes 12. I can fit them next to each other. Why wouldn't I do that? Now, you can cheat and you can create this thing called spacer, right? This is not going to be the solution, but I'm just showing you that this could be an option. So you could set spacer to background color white, right? And then we'll do this and we'll add form field spacer over here. Technically that's cool, right? Yay. But now we have this div lying around there. Not so cool. We're not going to do that. So let's delete spacer. Okay, bye-bye spacer. And we'll delete this guy. So now we are back to our problem. So what we could do is we could create a nested grid, right? So what we could do is we could cut this guy and we could say, okay, sub container, a little foreshadowing there for you. And we could do this, and then we could do sub container. And we can go here. Now, subcontainer is still a grid item of our parent grid. So we need to set it to display grid, of course, because it also now becomes a container. So it's got a bit of a identity crisis going on because it's a child, but it's also a parent. This happens. I'm a child, but also a parent. But now we need to set grid column to 1 minus 1 because we want this one to span the full width. But then we want to set its grid template columns to the same thing because it also now needs to span 12. And then if we now go into our browser, I think I got everything in place. We're almost there, but we have a little bit of an overhang here. And this is because we haven't set the gap yet, right? So if we copy the gap into here, then we're good. And as you can see, again, with the responsiveness, it's going to snap to 6 because we're reducing to 6 here. And all our fields here, we want them to just then take up the full width, right? So that's all good. So what's the problem? Well, I mean, there isn't really a problem, so to say. But why repeat this if you don't have to? And you don't have to with Subgrid. So what we get, because Subgrid inherits its track and sizing from its parent, and it inherits its gap. So if we throw this away and we replace this with Subgrid, then we're going to get the same end result. But now we don't have to worry about the track sizing or the gaps because they are being inherited from its parent grid. But if you do want to, you can override them. So let's say for whatever reason you wanted this to have 2 rem gaps, you can do that. But of course now you see you're starting to have the opposite problem because you're giving it a bigger gap. So now it's like kind of, doing the opposite. And of course, if you do 0.5, you'll have the problem going the other direction. So, but that is one of the great things that Subgrid gives you is it plays with the track sizing. So it will size exactly the same as the rest of your grid and you inherit your gaps. So if you literally just want to inherit the track sizing and inherit the gap, that's the same as your parent container, which is exactly what we want here. Subgrid is the jam and it's going to get you there. So this is where I'm going to end this one today. We can now see that with these containers or placeholders, we have the layout that we want or the structure that we want. Now we just need to throw our actual form fields in there. And so in our next video, I will do, maybe it won't be the next one I upload, but in a future video that's not too far in the future, I will then fill these with the actual form elements as per our design from over here. And we'll go ahead and add form validation on top using Zod. And there's a bunch of cool things that I've learned in the last couple of weeks from some stuff we did at Factorial. So I'm looking forward to sharing all of that with you. If you don't want to miss that one, hit the subscribe button down there. If you like this one, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. So I know you didn't like this. I hope you like it though. But if you didn't, let me know with the down sad thumb. And until the next one, make your part of the web just a little bit more accessible, a little bit more fun, and keep rocking the open web. Peace.